Okay, this is Greg Miletic. I am the director of the Future of Pinball, and I am lucky enough to be sitting here with several of the people who worked on the Pinball 2000 project. Why don't we just go around and introduce yourself?
Roger Sharp was the director of marketing and licensing.
Duncan Brown, software engineer on Pinball 2000 and Star Wars Episode 1.
Tom Evan, system programmer and architect for the Pinball 2000.
Cameron Silver, a programmer on Pinball 2000 and Episode 1, and a few WPC games as well.
But even at that point in time, you didn't see pinball shutting down? Or you...
I didn't believe that it would. I thought that somehow it would be sustained and that truthfully corporate management and ownership would never abandon that lifeblood.
Harry Williams, from the beginning, had always kept the company alive doing whatever he had to do. If pinball was down, make more Shuffle Alleys or rifle games. To just completely abandon the origins of the company was, I don't think, something anyone foresaw.
I think it was dumbfounding. I think the realization for me, and whether Cameron, Tom, or Duncan buy into this, was, I guess, twofold. One, when Williams actually acquired the amusement game assets from Bally Midway. I didn't think that would ever happen. That was one. The second, truthfully, was when the Gottlieb name left the business. That was, I won't say a wake-up call, but that was like a bell ringing saying, oh my God, what's going on? I mean, there's no Gottlieb pinball anymore.
And yet, because of all those things, all of the talent in the entire world for pinball was now concentrated in Williams Valley Midway.
Yeah.
It was all there. They had all the talent, all the patents, all the creativity, all the gung-ho pinball people. I mean, if that should have been the last man standing in pinball if there was going to be one.
Yes, it should have been.
In this part of the movie, we were just having Pat Waller discuss High Speed, which was a pretty revolutionary game, I think, at the time. Anybody want to talk about that game? Or about that period, the mid to late 80s?
It was before my time.
Oh, sure. Thanks a lot.
I was in high school.
Wait, were you born then?
But you did you play High Speed when it was out?
Not when it was new.
Okay.
That is what got Lyman started. When I first met Lyman at Papa 2 in New York City and saw this incredible pinball player who had an incredibly unique style and discipline. And we got to talking. And High Speed was the first pinball machine he played, and it really captivated him. Steve Ritchie was a madman, and he had gotten a car and had done 170 or 180 miles an hour out in the desert, and the police pulled him over, and it's one of the Steve Ritchie stories, and out of that was the inspiration for the game. But I think, truthfully, you had a game that had a very compelling theme at a time where there wasn't a lot going on thematically with original games, even licensed games. I mean, if you look back at them, they were still target-based or spinner-based. I mean, the features and the functionality were not necessarily tied in to a plot line or a storyline, as they subsequently became. But I think that, truthfully, with High Speed, the appearance of a red beacon on top of the cabinet was just, it shouted you to, oh my God, what's going on over there?
Right.
Here's a sound, you got away. There was a certain rush in playing that game. And just the kinetics. Steve, I always believed, was just a master of kinetics.
I thought it was the first game with a real story, a real storyline.
That's what I'm saying.
And that was primarily what Larry's
input.
Input was to introduce the storyline to pinball.
George on screen a moment ago was talking about how Pat Lawler and Steve Ritchie kind of, at least in his perspective, kind of dominated the scene there. Is that your guys' perception too? Were they like, they kind of ran the show, or what was the? You can say whatever you want to, and you can retract it if you want to.
Yeah.
I thought they got along famously. They were always having lunch together and drinking coffee and, presents on birthdays.
Nothing but the utmost respect for each other's work.
Sure. Non-competitive.
No.
Always there to help each other.
out. Yeah. No, there was.
I don't think that was the question. The question was if they got along.
With or without.
Yeah, no, I don't don't care if they didn't get along, we can hear about that too. But just in terms of, was the company sort of, I mean, were they the two kind of lead?
There was a competitive edge there. I think.
Yeah, there needed to be a competitive edge.
Yeah.
I think that Pat came out of the blue with Larry. Bonsai Run or Wrecking Ball, whatever you want to call it, established. Okay, it wasn't.
That's a working title.
It wasn't the massive success that everybody thought it would be, only because of the price point being higher than the others. But to incorporate a vertical pinball machine with a traditional one and have a good storyline and everything else was actually one of the first projects I worked on for the advertising and PR when I got to the company. But I think that Steve's heritage was that he had made the company a lot of money, and he was kind of his own man, very fixated on how things needed to be, and whatever team he worked with, he usually burned through, and people never wanted to work with him again because Steve's approach was Steve's approach. So I think that did the company make concessions for both of them, and maybe didn't make the same ones for any of the other designers? Absolutely. And yet other people who truly were incredibly successful and influential on the company's success, like Barry Osler and others from years previous, where they probably didn't get the same level of respect and or support that maybe they deserved. So
I think that goes with the squeaky wheel theory, right?
yeah, it does.
The one who shouts the loudest gets the most attention.
Yes, and both of them tended to be extremely good shouters.
We're looking at the early P2K prototype, and I mean, Cameron, you worked on, well, both of you, I guess, worked on that. What was that like? How long have you been working on that machine?
Well, as an engineer, it was great because there was all this new code that had to be developed. So I was having a great time. And Tom's a cool guy to work with. And, I believed in what John was trying to do. And I was happy to work with him. We'd worked on Circus. We worked really well together. I liked his ideas. He was a great guy. I didn't object when Pat and George unveiled, the reflection model, because I thought, clearly that was a better model. There was no hard feelings or anything like that. But working with John's new designs, it was great. I mean, he's real. When he starts working on something, he just aims, for the sun. And he'll come up with the best and coolest, most fantastic thing he can think of, and then try and figure out a way to make it work. And I like that approach, rather than straight away start, well, that's going to be too expensive. I shouldn't even think about that.
Did anybody know what Pat and George were working on while they were working on it?
I don't think any of the engineering plebeians did.
I kind of knew a little bit of what they were doing without a lot of input, and just waited for them to bring something in.
Was there some sort of milestone that was about to happen that forced them to bring it in when they did, or just it was just time?
As far as I know, they were just ready. I just remember Pat coming into my office because at that point I was across the street in the Midway part of it, and wanted me to give him some help because guess what? They had driven it in his truck, and I was the first one that they showed it to as they set it up in one of the front little meeting rooms. And the minute they turned it on, I looked at it and it was like, okay, yep. Yeah. Don't know why I didn't think of it.
That was exactly my reaction. Yeah. And I think everyone else felt the same. Even John too, so. Yeah,
and then they brought in Neil and Kenny and, sort of people. And it was like, this is a no-brainer. And it truly was an elegant approach to dimensionalize pinball for, a marketplace that was no longer focused purely on the mechanical aspects of, leisure time entertainment. They wanted something that was a little bit more visual.
The best thing about it was that it despite what everyone says, it really doesn't change the game that much. But it takes away a lot of the wordiness of it. Like instead of saying, shoot the left ramp for jackpot, you can just put something there and the player's like, just instinctively wants to shoot it.
I remember how excited you and John were when you got that first. You had the prototype of the monitor in the back box.
Right.
So you had all the hardware running. And then you got that first reflective one that made the little ship that you hit the rubber band.
What was it, an X-Wing fighter? I think.
Yeah, something.
Right.
And just hit the rubber band and it flew up. And everybody
was moving. It was moving like, it was sort of floating there above the playfield. And you hit it. and
that just blew everyone away.
Right,
I
there
think
was a
Neil was
lot-
like crying or
right,
something.
right.
when
There
he
was a
saw it.
line out of my office door down the corridor with people wanting to play it.
Just to shoot the TIE fighter.
Just that one stupid little TIE fighter.
Yeah, I remember that. That was cool.
And,
So.
you know, that...
Before you guys went in the secret room?
Yes.
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 Long before.
Right, this was we were still trying to get the Star Wars license, and I think people were balking at the cost of it. And this was this was partly, look what we can do with Star Wars, which we then did.
And it was still amazingly mechanical. You had a ball,
Right. And
doing
you could-
everything it always did, but
Right.
instead of a target with a hot stamp of a
Right.
little TIE fighter on it.
And you could feel it because the
Yes.
ball is still hitting a piece of, it's still hitting a physical target inside the machine, so you could
Right.
you could feel the physical feedback.
Yeah.
And
that was where everybody went, wow, okay.
Stepping back from that for just a moment, I mean, was there a sense that Pinball 2000 had to be better than what pinball was, or there are other ways it could have gone, for instance,
it had to
theoretically.
it had to earn. That's all anyone cared. Just do something that's not too expensive that earns money.
What about, was it ever discussed like a machine that costs theoretically half as much as machines you were producing?
The problem with
Trying
that,
to try to lower costs instead, make something better than.
You couldn't. I mean, we
Right,
tried
it's
it.
been
We
tried.
tried it previously because, truthfully, Gottlieb had come out with some single-level games, probably like 10 or 15 years earlier.
even
Williams
Jackpot
did
was an
too.
attempt at that too.
And it's about 1989, so I guess a little bit, about 10 years. Came out with Silver Slugger, Las Vegas, and others, and effectively whatever we perceived as their success drove us to do Harley Davidson, which was the first one, as a very simple layout and play field, but we backed off of it when it came to ball time, and what we did on the bottom part of Barry's design, as well as widening the space between the flippers and using smaller flippers. So we didn't go into it with the mentality, and I was really against it. I really fought for it with sales. We did not go into it with the same mentality as had been the case with games from the 70s, which is effectively what it was a throwback to. It's going to be a less expensive game. There's less features to it, but it's going to be fun. It's a good bar piece. And the game ball time is going to be, like a minute. Well, it can't be a minute. It has to be 40 seconds. Well, you start carving things out, and suddenly you're in a diametrically opposed situation between what it is that you're building off of, which was the Gottlieb principle, Bad Girls, and the whole slew of others, the single level play fields, and then we came out with ours. So I think we missed the boat. But I do remember, at least with Pinball 2000, that there was, and you guys may or may not remember this, there was some talk about potentially doing a lower priced game. So we'd have conventional pinball still as a secondary game, a la what I think Duncan said before, where, hey, if something's not working from Harry Williams' time, do a Shuffle Alley over here, do a novelty game over here. All right, this is our premier brand, Pinball 2000. And once this is established and we have the kit thing and all the rest of it, once we get all of those machines out in the field, there may be some places where they just don't want it. We're going to have our lower price. And we actually started talking about one's going to be Williams, one's going to be Bally, or we're going to come up with another branded, corporate name for it.
Well, even the kit was one nod towards trying to get the cost down.
Yeah.
Once you get enough cabinets out there, then you can upgrade to the latest game at a mere fraction.
Which was
so
the
the
video-
story went.
That was the video game mentality.
Yeah.
I mean, you're going to buy the wood, and the wood's always going to stay really good.
Yeah.
And all we're going to do, here it is. All you're going to do is just change and swap this out, and lo and behold, you have a brand new game. But when you want to bring back the original game, you can because it's still there.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, in the end, the kit prices were a significant fraction of the previous WPC prices, and the
Right.
game price was drastically higher.
Well, you're shaking your head. Was there a bad reason for why that turned out like that, or is that just the nature of a playfield? It's very expensive.
No, I thought it was a great idea. I think that our markup as a company was ludicrous. If you're pricing yourself out of the business, then what's my justification for buying, the kit as opposed to making the extra investment of an extra $1,000 in a brand new game?
Was the margin on the kits higher than it was on the machine itself?
I think not in absolute dollars, but probably in absolute percentages, sure.
Mm-hmm.
And
And it's a different mentality than video games.
right.
I mean, you're selling a software update, at a fraction of what the dedicated cabinet cost. If we had taken that same approach and the same financial model, then maybe something like this, would have worked better. Although, granted, to Duncan's point, you do still have a fairly complex play field that you have to work with.
And the original thinking, at least what was talked about, was flood the market, even if we have to sell these games at a lower than normal profit margin, flood the market with the cabinets to displace the older product and get the cabinets there to sell the kits later.
Right, and renew.
And then you've just got this built-in perpetual market. And somewhere along the line, that turned into how much money can we make off this cool new product while we can?
How much can we squeeze it and strike while the iron's hot?
Yeah.
So we overpriced it.
Let's see.
I think the thinking in those days was far better to underbuild than to have to blow them out. But
Right, because the operators were starting to expect, reduced prices, and they weren't buying things because they're going to lower the price. Don't worry about it.
but
Each $50 increase.
yeah, if they could have made 1,000 more Attack from Mars and a couple thousand more Medievals, that would have been just pure profit. But
I think the mentality at Williams was far different than what is today at Stern.
do you think?
Well, we never thought back then of the incremental sales. I mean, the number that Duncan just, stated was really true. Let's get distributors to commit to 1,000.
Look at that lamp effect.
If they commit to 500, 500 is not enough to get the line going. If they commit to 200, they have to take all 1,000. And even in the case of Gold Edition, Adams Family, when they sold out the 1,000, like before they even built it, it was like, oh darn, maybe we should have told them 1,500 or 1,200, but they had already made that commitment. And as I said, it had to be in blocks. If we had ever established a mindset in the company to go back and do reruns to the point of an Attack from Mars or Medieval Madness or any of the other games over the years where we did undersell, I think it probably would have helped, stabilize the company. I don't think it would have changed the ultimate destiny of it because I think the mindset was already there. But I think that you would have seen games that would have gotten probably their fair chance to be much more successful than they already were.
So why didn't Williams go back? I mean, it doesn't seem like necessarily a brilliant, inspired idea to go back and build hit machines again.
Williams-
Why didn't you do that?
This is part of the reason Williams ultimately failed. Williams was totally geared up to make 10,000 of an identical thing, or 20,000 of an identical
That
thing.
beautiful factory up in
Waukegan.
Waukegan just cost a fortune to keep fed.
Right, and so you couldn't go back and make 1,000 of something cost effectively. They simply weren't geared up to do that, whereas someone like Gary Stern is. But that's also part of what killed Williams. When sales of a given title were dropping into the 2,000 and 3,000 range, they simply weren't capable of doing that cost effectively.
Right.
When the entire run was under what they were able to do cost effectively, it started to all fall in on
Well,
itself.
it becomes under the threshold and suddenly you're producing more models than you really should.
Right.
You have to feed a production and assembly line. We had already abandoned shuffle alleys, which for a period of 30 or 40 years had really stabilized production.
Right.
In off times.
You could sell 100, 200 shuffle hours a year forever,
Right.
but Williams wasn't geared
And
up
we
to
walked
do
away
that.
from it. And that absolutely was the most profitable product that the company ever built. Forget about pinball, shuffle alleys.
That was the same problem with the Redemption games too.
Yeah,
They couldn't
Tic Tac
dribble
Toe.
them out slowly enough.
Yeah. That whole production run problem is what happened to Attack from Mars and Monster Bash. By the time the production run has gotten so short that you have to decide how many you're going to sell before you've even started building them, it's real easy to miscalculate.
And if somebody didn't step up and order in the first week, oh, sorry, we got a new game.
Yeah, we've already got to schedule the next one, and too bad you missed the window.
Right, and if somebody, God forbid, bought one that didn't do as well because they stepped up to the plate, then you probably lost them for the next one. And if the next one was more successful, I mean, you might have gotten them every third one, every fourth one, where 10, 15, 20 years previously, if those same people were in business, you were bringing out a logical number of machines over the course of the year. Even if it was 8 models a year or 10 models a year, okay, I can take that to fill out my route, to fill out my location. Again, going back to the fact that space wasn't at the premium that it eventually became. A person could have 10, 15, 20 pinball machines in a location.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the difference with a publicly owned company. Gary can be flexible enough to run his factory at whatever rate the market desires run however many of a game he needs to meet demand. You know, Williams needed to make 10,000 of something. If they couldn't make 10,000 of something, they needed to be in some other business. You know, it's just,
What was the-
there's
what
no
was-
other choice.
I'm sorry. What was the view of Sega pinball at the time within your company?
Duncan?
No, Tom,
Me?
what, Sega pinball? How do you mean?
Well, we just saw the thing at the trade show
Can
where it
you-
said,
can
"Can
you
you
read
read
this?"
this?" Yes, and Lyman talks about how he figured they were probably pretty scared because they didn't quite know whether what you guys were doing was going to be a hit. But if it was going to be a hit, they potentially had a big problem on their hands.
Or not.
Oh yeah, potentially.
I mean, they might not have felt the need to follow suit. I mean,
Right,
let's
if
face
Williams
it.
had gone up and done the Pinball 2000 thing and it sold well, they might have just kept the old business
Right,
along.
and taking the model that I mentioned before to say, all right, you have the higher end, here's this lower, price model.
On the other hand,
Yes.
they didn't really know how to do that all on their own. They were really better
Yeah,
at copying our product. So,
Yes.
Right.
so what would they do?
Yeah, when they ran out of Williams games to copy, that was going to be a real
And that's,
problem.
that was the point I was going to make, and Tom just was correct.
Beat
I
you
mean,
to it.
was there a fear or concern about sick? No,
Yeah.
never. Because all it was, what are they going to rip off from Larry or from Pat or from Steve or from anybody else to adapt and apply into their games? I don't know. There were quality issues, reliability issues. We did have, truthfully, the strength of Joe Dillon and what he meant to that world of distributors and operators. And
Who is Joe Dillon?
Joe Dillon was the vice president of marketing and sales for the company, and had been part of a fixture in the industry for well in excess of 30 years. Just a remarkable, good guy. The kind of person that, truthfully, if you have a borderline game, Joe will make it a good selling game, as opposed to it being borderline or being a failure. He could squeeze out as much as he could, basically being relatively honest in that process and saying, look, this is not a great one, but help me. Take 10, take 15.
Joe
take
Dillon could
20.
have sold Circus.
Yeah,
Put it that way.
yep. Might not have made it a success, but he could have sold it into the marketplace.
Pinball Circus?
Voltaire.
Oh, Circus Voltaire. Right. Oh, there's Jim Patla beating up on the game. That one got dropped off the truck.
Who here was at the launch?
I was.
Both of you. What was the? I mean, the film talks about that people seem to think it was a big hit right there. Is that the sense you guys had?
Oh.
It was amazing.
It was beyond, I think beyond belief.
Pinball had been kind of in the doldrums for a while, and everybody was eager for the industry leader to show them the path to the future. We're not making as much money on pinball. We're not selling as many pinballs. These are the distributors, some operators. Just the industry's down. Rescue it for us.
Well,
we all love pinball. What are you going to do to bring it back? And they were all just like, oh my God, you've done it.
Yeah, I mean, pinball became, a shadow. You kind of walk by, oh, okay, that's the new one, fine, thanks, let's
They were
go
all
on
the
and take a
same. It
look.
was like a Happy Meal.
Yeah.
Based
It
on
didn't-
the launch, though, the European distributors like Nova just
Oh, they
got
went
totally on board. They did way more marketing than Williams
Yeah.
ever did.
Yeah, they made little Pinball 2000 pins they were handing out and
it was
brochures, and they were giving us stuff.
Remember the light thing or whatever it was, where you
Oh,
put,
we
it
did
in,
put the pennies in it.
you put the penny in and
Oh, yeah,
it reflected. I
yeah.
mean,
They had the for Star Wars. Was it Star Wars? Right? They had those big neon light symbols
Yeah, yeah.
at the
I
trade
saw
show.
those for the first time in Germany the other day.
Yeah.
I think that everybody anticipated that we were going to come out with something new and bold and
Well, we
revolutionary.
kind of told them we were.
Yep, but I think other than Hans Rosenzweig, who came over and saw it firsthand and was already ramped by the time
Yeah.
he got back, I think that when we did our presentation, that it really was a first-class effort, as you see in some of the footage. Everybody was just blown away. It was astounding. I think that you could ask anybody, what was the video game that you had on the stand, and then anybody would have remembered whatever the video game was. I mean, it was the show for Pinball 2000. It just stole the show. And truthfully, there is a love affair for pinball. I mean, everybody has a soft spot in their heart. Really, I mean, tell us what you have to do, and we'd love to see pinball come back and be a part of it. So I think the industry has never really abandoned pinball. Unfortunately, it's been the manufacturing side, either through, whatever reasons and purposes, that pinball has come down to being, to Duncan's point, the last man standing, being Gary as opposed to Williams, which probably would have been a bit more correct.
I think if
Taking nothing away from Gary.
right, no, but I think
Gary's heart and soul and his bloodline is in it, and truthfully, during the lean years back in the early 70s, without Sam Stern riding on top of the company, God only knows what Lou Castro would have done. I mean, we maybe never would have seen the last, 25 years of the company. But Sam Stern was, good person.
I mean, looking at it now, you can see Gary deserves to be the last man standing more than some heartless, faceless
Yeah, I mean,
corporation.
he is heart and soul into it.
But in, I don't know, March of '99, if you told me that that Gary Stern was going to be the last man standing instead of Williams, I never would have believed it.
My thought would have been, so Gary's going to buy Williams.
Yeah, or something.
We're looking at the Star Wars section now. Since we have two Star Wars guys, do you guys have anything to comment on? Or?
It's not my fault. I promise it's not my fault.
It's George Lucas created Jar Jar, and what could we do? Oh, that was a fun day.
That was a
fun lightsaber fight.
Which people actually thought were the actual actors.
Yeah.
I just remember when the initial negotiations were going on for Star Wars, and I reached out to him, and I know that at that time Sega was very much interested in wanting to get it as well, and explained, nope, we're going to get it, and whatever it takes, and going into Neil Nicastro and suggesting how much we should offer, what I thought made sense, and it would bankrupt the company. It actually, in the long run, if you look back on it, it was not all that expensive a license. We paid more for the NBA, I'd say, or for the NFL, or for any of the other licenses.
And now that we have you here, without making you reveal any figures, can we say that when someone, say Neil, just to name names, starts blaming the failure of Pinball 2000 or the excess price of Star Wars Episode 1 on that expensive license, is that maybe taking a slight liberty with the facts there?
That was his excuse, to squeeze more money, but it wasn't based on the cost. Yeah, on a cost on a per unit basis. But the point I was going to say, and we're seeing some of the footage, and we saw a wonderful person from Lucas playing the game when she came out to look at it, Stacy Molima, was this whole idea of new technology. I can't reveal it to you yet, but I'm going to be asking for more assets than you've ever given before. You're not going to understand it, but you got to go with this. And I promise you this will be a breakthrough.
Right, she didn't see it from the very beginning, did she? When did she see it?
Very late on.
Right, it was in that conference room.
Yeah, because I needed to get more assets from them. And truthfully, at the end of the day, we had access to more stuff than LucasArts or any other licensee. I got stuff that nobody else could get.
Yeah. Did you return the Darth mold?
Oh yeah, we had the mold for the mask.
Sure. I did, as a matter of fact, yes.
Not only did
John was terrified. He's like, oh my God, we can't have this.
I know.
Not only did we have CDs of every picture they'd ever taken on any set and of every costume. Footage. We started asking them for 3D models.
Yeah,
they were freaking out.
We had the mesh stuff and all because, I remember we took a trip out to the ranch, and I had set everybody up, all the main people in licensing, that I won't have you sign an NDA, but you're going to realize now why I've been asking what I've been asking, and working with the toy companies, with Galoob, with Hasbro, for some of their toys that we could incorporate into the game. And it was like, all right, get ready, and we did a dog and pony show, and it was like, oh my God, they were just astounded. I said, you can't think of it as a conventional pinball machine anymore.
Right, you run out of tape, right?
Yes.
I remember taping that.
Everyone at this convention were astounded as well. We had,
and the Lucas people came to this convention too.
We had from this line here that you can see, went down the corridor, passing several other booths.
They were lined up around the block, even the freaky ones.
Yeah.
And that's not the person with the beard; it's the one behind it. And Jake Lloyd, who did speech for us. I think it was an incredible collaboration to bring everything to realization in the game. truthfully, and it's not a knock against John Papaduke, I wish that we had actually designed the game from the ground up being Star Wars, as opposed to taking an existing game that he was working on and slapping on the Star Wars license.
Although, to me, it proved the
Please,
point
yes.
of what we were doing at that show is that everybody knows what pinball is. I mean, there's no one in the whole U.S. that doesn't know what a pinball machine is, but none of them ever play it these days, or they haven't played it in years. And these people were all just enthralled. Both the ones that never knew about pinball and the ones that hadn't played it in years.
If you'd given me a game that had more than 3 shots and had some good geometry.
But those people, they
can only
it.
make 3 shots.
They can only make 3 shots. They loved it. They couldn't get enough of it. There's that little kid who's
I
like
don't
his-
want jet bumpers locked away in the top right portion of a pinball machine. That
We
you
don't
got.
make games for you.
Yeah.
Well, we didn't.
There's that kid who was
I'm
like
universalizing my comments.
11 or 12, right? You remember this
I
kid?
don't remember.
And his mother, like for his birthday, was going to take him to the Star Wars convention. It was a big deal. He was just a complete Star Wars nut. And so, because he'd gotten good grades that year or whatever, this huge treat for him was to get brought to the Star Wars convention. And he kind of looked around and saw everything, and for the whole 2-3 days, however long we were out there, just kept getting back in line to play this pinball
I mean,
game.
you got to understand, this was the first Star Wars convention that they had authorized. It was in Denver. I forget what the college campus was.
It was on an Air Force base.
Right.
Yeah, but I mean, some kind of campus facility as well, wasn't it?
Maybe.
Yeah.
And there was some sort of
But
air
there was-
museum in there.
I think at that
there
point I
was-
hadn't slept for about 4 months.
There was rain.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I remember
There were
that.
literally
Because I was going to go to Six Flags.
of
Yeah.
thousands of people lined up to come in,
Yeah.
and it was a zoo. Literally and figuratively, a zoo, not just because you had people dressed up in costume, but just a zoo, and you had major displays by all of the other folks that were doing merchandise, whether it was Coca-Cola, whether it was toy companies or what have you, and there we were with, what do we have, 2 games?
2 games. Yeah.
Small little space, perfect
It was labeled
space.
Pez.
Pez, yes, we were Pez people.
And to Duncan's point, it was non-stop. People just coming up to play, and
The game still shows up in the Play Meter earnings
Yeah,
polls.
I went back and
7
found
years
that for
old.
Greg.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's still, every once in a while.
I understand that, and
I mean, I don't like the game. I've sold mine. I'm not saying it's a good game, but it's overall, that's what it's supposed to do.
What was the feeling in Williams between making games easy for novices versus trying to appease the elite players who were so vocal on?
Yeah,
Well,
but
of
I
course
was-
you try to do a game that does both.
Right.
But on Star Wars, I think we tilted heavily towards
Yeah.
the Star Wars enthusiast rather than the pinball.
And my only comment was based on the fact that I would like to have seen a design. I would like to have seen a Circus Voltaire, a Theater of Magic, where John's mindset was tied into a theme from day one, and he already knew some of the toys and some of the things. Truthfully, and I don't remember what the theme was. We had a
Space
preliminary
Pirates.
Space Pirates.
Space Pirates.
We had a preliminary
Close.
design.
What did you say?
That was
Close.
that design.
Star Wars, Space Pirates.
And my only comment was, okay, you're going to start all over. Oh no, I got the game already started because we were against
Well,
the
we
clock.
started all the software and rules and everything started again.
But I was waiting for
Right.
something more in the physical realm of the play field, of switching. And I remember one of the big things was the center loop around, which was a fast shot. It was like, you're going to kill people. Give me ramps. Give me something so a person takes some time. So, I
And
mean,
we
whatever. Well, I know. I appreciate you people listening to me.
That horseshoe was the most awesome horseshoe ever in all of pinball.
But not for the average
Right, but it
player.
was deadly though. It
It
didn't
was
just
dead.
rain.
I was saying that was the coolest shot I ever got
I
to
agree,
shoot.
but-
So it was a good.
but
You're right.
think-
It's good to
think-
take it out of the game. But
Think of what
man.
you're saying.
Yeah.
I mean, here we have a game that's simple for the average player, and we're going to just screw them because
No.
of this incredible shot that comes. I loved it.
No, what I'm saying, he took your advice on that one.
No, he did, but I guess what I'm suggesting, we're looking at the play field now. It would have been nice to have like more stuff around for people to interact with instead of always going only to the center, always going.
I agree with you. Yeah, look at me.
Although,
That's and
can I
and in all
clear up
honesty,
one?
wait, hold off, and I'll let you fill in. If John had started with that design from day one, knowing that it was Star Wars, maybe I would feel differently about it. And it could be exactly the same. I think the part that always annoyed me was he took a pre-existing layout that had no rhyme or reason. And, you know, what we've all been talking about is in this modern era, Tom said it before, with high speed, you have storylines. Well, everybody crafts their games according to those storylines. And I know Duncan did the same thing, and Cameron did the same thing. Everybody did. It wasn't just a question of title slapping, which was different than what our competition did. They could title slap wherever they wanted, not to mention any names. But I always took a great deal of pride in the fact that the creative people that we had working in pinball were doing things that were original, that were creating this environment in this world, whether it was a license or not a license. Cactus Canyon Art, we're going to have these things, we're going to do guns, it's pop-ups. I mean, it was like, okay, we're going to put a train in it. If John had started from day one saying that that design was Star Wars, whether I get it or not, I'll change it to Space Wars or something else, fine. The fact that it started off as something different is, I think, the part that has always stuck in my
So
craw.
does
But
that?
I didn't want to interrupt. Duncan before.
Are you saying that? Do you believe that harmed the game on a sales level, or did it just harm it on
No.
sort of a fun aesthetic level?
He's even admitting that if the game could have ended up exactly the same, it's just conceptually knowing that he didn't start with a complete theme in mind from day one.
And I think because of that, there were some difficulties in it reaching the broadest audience that it might have and actually having the staying power. If I would have taken Star Wars and put it on Revenge from Mars, that layout, I think that you would have had a game that would have been much more successful in sales, much more successful in the acceptance, and probably would have helped perpetuate, maybe for one more model, Pinball 2000.
Although I'll point out the earnings numbers for you in the play meter polls. How quickly Revenge dropped off those charts and how Star Wars still shows up. But
I understand.
I want to clear up one misconception about Star Wars is designed so that you're always supposed to shoot up the middle. Everybody says that, and it seems to be true. After watching people play, at the convention especially, we designed a game so that if you did nothing but shoot up the middle,
Right.
because you were a novice who flipped both flippers at the same time,
You're okay.
the game would still progress and be fun.
Right, but if I do a skill shot coming in off of my plunger and it goes down between the flippers, there's a problem with that feed. If I hit targets and there's this magnetic force that suddenly shifts my ball out of nowhere, well, those are not friendly things for the average player.
The game difficulty thing, it would seem like a place where management would come in. Were they interested at all in sort of the game difficulty question? Because you'd think that they might say
all they cared about was the game earning well.
Yeah.
They'd let us do
Actually
whatever.
selling.
they never
Selling.
said this game seems too hard or this game is
No.
too easy.
There were murmurings, we've got to try and, especially towards the end of WPC, which was just after I started there, there was some murmurings of let's try and make games that are a little bit more simple because we've sort of gone a bit insane with rules and stuff like that.
Right.
And that's where you get games like, Scared Stiff and Arabian Nights and stuff like
I'm
that.
just trying to picture, in general, Williams management, in air quotes here that you can't see, coming by and playing the games on a daily basis and telling Pat Lawler or Steve Ritchie or somebody how to design it based on that.
They didn't.
They would have laughed him out of the building.
They used me. Seriously, when I first got hired there.
You were the spy?
No, well, everybody thought, but no, that was, Marty Glazeman, who was at that time the vice president of sales and marketing, said, you're
And
the
they used
game
language,
person,
too.
I'm not. And I was the one that would go back and play and try to give them feedback because they weren't players or the sales guys.
Although, to his credit, Neil would actually come back and
Neil was a
offer
player.
actual constructive
Yep,
criticism.
Neil was absolutely a player. And to Steve Ritchie and Pat Lawler's credit, they always knew when to put in stuff that they wanted to take out so that when Neil came by to say, it's too expensive, then I'll just take out this component over here.
That was only
All right,
taped
fine.
on.
Right.
It's just sitting on the wood.
Yeah. So I wouldn't necessarily call myself a spy, but I think that what they looked at me for was just to provide some sense of what do you think? And it wasn't a question of going back and dictating, make it harder or easier.
I don't think it was even possible. The games had gotten too complicated and the market was too weird. But Steve Kordick would tell stories about way back in the day when you had a game that had 3 bumpers and a horseshoe lane or something. They would spend a lot of time just trying to make shots, or having people play for hours and watching where the shots went. And they would change the angle of the flippers a couple of degrees. If you needed to make late shots, they'd drop the flippers a little bit to make that easier. Or if people were making too many up the center shots and getting the stuff too easily, they'd up the flippers.
There was one day on Tic-a-Tac-Toe where Steve was in my office for like 5 hours just playing the whitewood over and over and making notes. And I'm thinking, that's like one, you know,
One roll of holes.
like
9 holes and 2
what are you making notes? And I let him do it, and he'd come back and he'd put some nails in and tweak this and that, and
The
you
most-
could feel the difference.
The
It was
most
incredible.
amazing thing I ever witnessed in my time at Williams was when they were having trouble on Cactus Canyon.
Yeah.
There were lots of troubles on Cactus Canyon with team members leaving and going to Midway and all kinds of stuff. But there were like some rattly shots back behind, you know, there was
Right.
some loop shot. And Steve was down there at the bottom of the stairs with pliers and wire and a hammer.
Right.
And he sat there for a couple hours
Just to work on it.
just drilling holes and bending little wire guides, just all by hand, no
Yeah.
CAD system, anything. And when he was done,
It was great,
It
yeah.
was a lot smoother. I could make
Yeah.
the shot.
yeah, and I think they actually didn't use his changes for the production game, but
Probably
I
cost
mean,
3 cents.
the
more.
man still had it. He
Yeah.
could sit there.
Well, that was the huge difference between Williams and everyone else as well. Was that we went through like 3 or 4 whitewoods,
Yeah.
and so the playfields, good game, bad game, whatever you want. The playfields, at least the geometry was there.
Right,
you know,
the
full- you know.
kinetics are there. Well, except on no fear. But anyway,
Ooh.
well,
Brown.
just
Ooh.
lots of tiny little narrow shots.
You think? That was Steve's inexpensive game.
Yeah.
You want an inexpensive game? I'll give him an inexpensive game.
Yeah, well, we got it.
As long as you guys were just talking about it, I'll bring it up now. Wizard Box and Playboy were in development. What was talk about those games.
Well, Wizard Blocks, I didn't really get to see that much of it because we were, imprisoned in the Kahuna Zone, and Pat in general is fairly secretive. But what I saw, I mean, it was great. I don't know if the theme necessarily appealed to me all that much, but I liked their concept. I mean, they were really just, rather, for Revenge and Star Wars, we very much designed, sort of video, thought of cool things to do with the video screen, and then sort of thought about some pinball rules around that. And they did it the right way, the way that Revenge and Star Wars wished we could do it, which was, we'll design the pinball side of things first, and then think, more like we used to do in the dot matrix days. You think of, rules and ideas that perpetuate your theme, and then you do video that works around
Cause and
that.
effect versus
Right.
effect and cause.
Right, exactly.
I actually got dragged on to that project because when they cranked the price through the roof on Star Wars and all the orders got canceled, and so production got shortened, which moved up the next game earlier. They were going to finish it sooner. All of a sudden, it was all hands on deck to finish that. So I started doing some programming in Wizard Blocks, and I would join in the every afternoon. We'd have a 4-player game in Lewis's office and play it, and everybody was having a lot of fun. I mean,
And
it was,
those lights that he had were amazing.
Oh,
Yeah.
He had these big motorized lights.
Beacons.
Oh, that was
Oh,
so
yeah.
cool.
I'd forgotten about that.
Yeah.
Plus, he actually lit up the back of the playfield. He had
Yeah.
lights back there to overpower the mirror.
Right.
He
Well, we
thought that
had
everything
that
was
on,
too dark.
the lighting on Star Wars was
Not
a lot
enough.
better than Revenge.
Yeah,
Yeah,
not-
but he knew it was dark. I remember
Right.
Pat would
Yeah.
come down. I was
Well, we had to
sitting in the front.
learn what to do, right?
Yeah.
And Pat spent some time in theater as well, so he knew
Yeah.
all the tricks.
Well, but that was one of his things to me was
Yeah.
because Pat would come. I was back in the main building, and I remember Pat grabbing me and saying, "All right, come up with me, and go behind the door," which he closed, of course. And I wanted to show you something, and he talked about the lights, and I started playing one of the first whitewood layouts that he had, and just looking at shots and everything else, and you could see that the geometry and the kinetics were there. I mean, it was Pat kind of like on steroids, taking nothing away from Barry Bonds. But it was a heightened Pat compared to the previous games that he had been doing.
I think
And much closer. Huh?
Yeah.
I think he was revitalized
Yeah.
by it.
Yeah.
And he had time to watch what the first
Everyone
two
else
games
had
had
been
done.
doing wrong.
Right.
Yeah,
And
did
he
wrong.
said,
Yeah.
and truthfully, it wasn't effect and cause. It was cause and effect. Here, I'm taking the dot matrix and doing it in a totally different way. There's going to be awards going on and things. You're going to hit this target bank,
Yeah.
and here's the wizard popping up over here. Then there's going to be other things where you're actually impacting because of the way his layout was. And his layout was very similar to maybe like a roller coaster tycoon, because he had a crossing shot. There's a little bit of no, I'm just saying. Well, No Good Gophers, Roller Coaster Tycoon, Monopoly all follow very much the same kinetics. I mean, and that was some of where he was with his shots. But he had some other cool stuff. I mean, I like the blend of where he had it. I mean, it was a 4-flipper game. It wasn't his usual 3 flippers.
Yeah.
A lot of good crossing shots, and again, areas up on top of to what Cameron was saying, Duncan, this light stuff where, God forbid, you actually are lighting the back. He didn't
Wasn't
mind
there-
doing that.
As far as the theme on Wizard Blocks, I'm either going to show my triteness or complete disrespect to Pat, but I'm going to say it should have been Funhouse 2000. I never understood why he didn't just call it Funhouse 2000, because that was hugely popular game. It wasn't something like Addams Family where you need to go get a license again. Everybody knew it. And he could have had as much fun with it as he was having with Wizard Blocks.
Yeah.
Wizard Blocks was cool. He was having real fun with a little wizard guy. and
Maybe if
demons.
Roadshow had done better.
It seems like such a weird theme for Pat Lawler, Wizard Blocks.
Well,
does to me.
I don't know where he was completely going with it, but I mean, he had this weird little gremlin
Yeah, I mean, it was
on the
all
playfield,
fanciful.
and
But his stuff
there were
seems
going
more
to be different
blue-collar
wizards.
typically.
Some of it, but I think that to Duncan's point, there is a lot of, amusement park type of
Yeah.
carny
Yeah.
within
He was
camp.
going to have different wizards. That one the boy wizard, I think, was the first one, and it's the only one that ever got programmed. But there was going to, you were going to work your way up to the grand wizard.
Right.
He had this whole vision for it, which I always thought was really cool. But again, right out of the box, maybe I would have done Funhouse 2000. By the same token, maybe people would get tired of rehash games like Revenge from Mars and Funhouse 2000. I don't know, but
Or maybe you would have needed another Rudy head that would have been a solid object.
yeah, but you could have had, a Rudy head that was just blank and put different faces on it. I mean,
Just saying.
it could have been interesting. But anyway, if I was going to do a Pat Lawler game as Game 3 of Pinball 2000, I would have called it Funhouse 2000.
And to add in to the other part of your question, I'll speak for myself. I was totally against Playboy as a thing.
Really? Okay, yeah, I was going to go there next. How come?
Because the idea of what we were going to do for the European market really I didn't think was in keeping with how I've always viewed pinball. Even the original Playboy that Bally came out with in like 78, doesn't work for me.
You said what you're going to do for the European market. What was that?
We were going to have full nudity. It was an adult audience. Germany wanted that.
And there,
We were doing the Playboy license for our touchscreen that I had acquired. And they were all, balls to the wall, saying this is what we're going to
So
do.
to
And look at, so to speak, look at what we can display on the screen. And I remember, what was it, Keith and whoever just showing me some stuff as you were playing. And I said, oh, great. This is just what pinball needs.
Yeah.
We're kind of getting over the hump. It's kind of like
so to speak.
Americana. Thank you. Fine, I'm being philosophical. I won't be.
Wasn't that game originally like a haunted house theme or something?
So to speak.
It's funny how that
Yes, it
team
was.
left to their own devices was coming up with a really cool haunted house theme,
But
and then they were
Led by
told.
Scott.
They got the
Yeah.
pressure from sales that we needed a license. That license had to be more adult oriented, something that was a bar and tavern piece, and we needed a license. And I had already gone after Playboy for the touchscreen content. And it's like, hi guys, by the way, I'd like to do a deal for pinball. And ultimately, I mean,
There was some
Stern came out
unhappy
with it.
people as a
Yeah,
result.
that team was not happy about having that.
Who was on it?
I was going to say shove down their throat, but then you'd say so to speak.
No,
That was Keith and Dwight
that's right.
and Scott was
Pete Petrowski.
Yeah, Pete
Pete.
Petrowski.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
An interesting mix of personalities and egos.
it's
and what have you.
unfortunate that Scott never really got to do a game of his own
And truthfully,
because it
on
would
that
have been
game,
unstoppable.
the layout was great. I mean, you guys played it.
Just a little
Yeah.
bit,
I
yeah.
The
barely
layout,
remember it.
I mean, the shots were there. It was an elegant game, and truthfully, if you looked at the progress in design and even the utilization of technology from Revenge to Star Wars and then to Wizard Blocks, I mean, God, if people could have experienced number one Wizard Blocks, and then as players, non-players, whatever you want to call it, just the geometry, the game was real smooth. I mean, the shots were great. Forgetting about theme, just the pure kinetics. I enjoyed playing that as a whitewood. It was great. I mean, it made you feel good. There were good long sweeping shots. You had good viewpoints, so things weren't blocked out. Even whatever we would have done on the screen, and maybe you would have been a little bit distracted from what you were doing because of what you were hitting. And come on, it's a pinball. You can only imagine where the ball was going at various points in time.
like you, I didn't quite get the point of that theme. I mean, pinball has always been edgy and racy and buxomy, and
In a nice way.
yeah. But I mean, especially some of the stuff certain people were talking about doing with that visually, just you're going to so limit your market.
Well, but think about where Bally was, and it was Joe Dillon, bless his soul, when the company acquired it. In 1988, after Ramp Warrior became Truck Stop, some of the previous ideas that they had was to put a slot machine arm on a pinball machine, and to truly, I mean, if we're going to be out of the business because Bally was on the balls of its ass, let's just do something. And they had a couple of adult games that were really like over the edge. It wasn't rated X, but it was pretty damn close. And just figuring, if there's no American market anymore, there's no arcades anymore, we're going to go to the Reeperbahn in Germany, and that's our audience, and this is what we're going to do. And it was like, damn. And admittedly, they backed off from that. But to Duncan's point, I think that Bally always was more of the TNA company. I mean, you expected it. Just the nature of the artwork, the themes. But
again,
but in a nice way.
Some Dave Christensen,
Terry and the Pirates kind of artwork.
Yeah, some
lush,
some tight sweatered women, whatever. That was as racy as pinball ever really needed to get, as far as
right. It never had to be as overt.
Yeah,
racy but fun.
Yeah.
PG with kind of an R rather than an R to an X.
PG-15, yeah. I'm going to switch topics for a second here. One of the sections in the launch segment has a bunch of posts from Rec Games Pinball from people who are freaking out about Pinball 2000
without having seen it, by the way.
Right.
All right, go on.
Well, what I was going to ask was
time to defend. Come on.
Not so much Pinball 2000, because in the film we do talk about how you guys, what the criticism was and how you guys dealt with it. But in general, what was working with the internet community like, or dealing with that while you guys are trying to design games?
There's a member of what was Williams' engineering department that used to have a saying with regards to the internet, and I won't mention his name, but the saying was, "No good deed goes unpunished." And by that point, and not to discount everyone who posted to RGP back then, because most of them were normal, sensible, intelligent people. And it was just a small, very vocal minority who you just wanted to punch. And at that point, at least I had completely discounted them. And I was one of them at one point. But at that point, I just completely discounted them. And I really didn't care what they had to say, because, it's like Duncan said, they hadn't seen it. And before I'd seen it, when I just heard what it was about, I could not imagine what it was about. And, I didn't go around saying, "Oh, that's the end of pinball, we're all doomed, the sky is falling."
It's video pinball.
Right.
They can't.
I was just like, well, I have to see this because I just can't picture in my mind what it's like. But these guys, well, they still think that. They still think, well, I played Attack from Mars and Revenge from Mars and Star Wars, and they sucked, and no wonder they closed down. It was stupid.
Yes.
And it's like, how little vision do these people have that they can't see the potential?
Well, truthfully, they became self-fulfilling prophets. They ensured that the thing that supposedly they loved would be a failure because you could not please them.
Well, what they don't understand was Williams would have shut down anyway, and Pin 2000 just gave us an extra 9
Yeah, but they didn't even give it a chance.
Right.
This is what I'm saying.
Well, that's what
these people were willing to discount it before it started because their fear was that it wasn't pinball. And it was pinball, it was still mechanical. It wasn't like there was a screen. It wasn't video pinball. This was not something on Pinbane. This was real pinball.
I don't think they even understood how into pinball everyone at Williams was. I mean,
they didn't.
Nobody worked at Williams because of the high pay or because they loved the rats in the building.
Right, the lovely work environment.
Yeah, the smelly river out back. It was because they loved pinball. And so, sure, all of us, you tell us video pinball, we have all the same horrible reactions to that. But, we worked it out, made it something worthwhile.
They condemned us before we had a chance to really come to market. I know a particular designer where it is imperative for everybody who works with them to ensure that he no longer reads any of the posts. Because it hurts him deeply. He gets crazy. And it affects how he does his designs. And truly it becomes a tormenting thing for him. And in saying that, and people hearing that, they may take enjoyment in the fact that, good, we're having an effect. Let's destroy it. And my feeling, why? For what purpose?
Look at that one.
So that they don't do pinball
Is that
anymore?
the same one I said?
Or support it in whatever fashion you can.
A later section talks about the expo speech that George Gomez gave, where he kind of was.
I didn't see this. I was working.
The pre-eulogy?
We were doing
Right. Just talk about that. What you are. I think Tom and Duncan. I think you both commented that you were really surprised at the tone of the speech.
Yeah, totally out of left field for me. I was in the back of the room with some other Williams people, and we were all like, "What the heck? What's he talking about?
Where is he going with this?
Yeah, really. What, George? Come on, we're having the time of our
That is
lives.
usually the theatrical one.
Yeah, we've got this cool, tournament system, and we're selling a bunch of these games, and life's great. And sure enough, Monday morning, bam.
Were you there also, Roger?
Yeah.
And you were surprised at his speech?
I wasn't surprised at the emotion that he had. I was surprised that he was being that honest with everybody there, to the extent that he was. I mean, I've done talks at Expo over the years, and I know a lot of other people have been part of the program, and, it's always been, hey, support the hobby and, bring more people, and, hey, guys, it's going to go away at some point in time, but it was always falling on deaf ears. But I don't think that there was ever in the 21-year history of Expo, and I've been to every one, that there wasn't a point in time where somebody didn't say that, hey, it's kind of like on the edge and we need your help, kind of thing. I think that when George began that, it was like, all right, it's going to be another one of our refrains to, come on, guys, go talk to operators and go back and so on. I think the fact that he got into the detail and the level of emotionality that he did surprised me. I think he could have had a pin drop on the floor. I mean, nobody was breathing when he was talking. Nobody was moving. Nothing was going on. It was like you had this rapt audience of like, oh my God.
Jaws on the floor, somber.
Yeah, and I think when it was over, it was like, it can't be. It can't be. And
I mean,
it was like,
usually at the end of an expo talk, you get some applause or something.
right, no, there was stone silence. It was kind of like, wow. Yeah, you think of a balloon and think of a pin and just kind of like, just all the air going out.
And Tom, you felt sort of the same. You were there also.
I didn't hear the speech.
Oh, you didn't? Okay.
I heard it on a cassette playback later because we were in.
We were in the hall.
We
were working on the tournament system.
thing.
And that's actually, it was quite amusing because we'd been working really hard for a week and a half on this tournament
You mean
thing.
18 months?
On the tournament system?
Oh no, it's longer than that.
Yeah.
2
Yeah.
years.
Well, specifically on the tournament system.
But so I was hoping to sleep in on Monday morning and not come to work.
Tom did.
I slept in as well.
Oh, okay.
But the thing was, I'd heard rumours about this some big meeting on Monday morning. So I went up to Jim Patler, who was at the time the head
I was
of
on
engineering.
vacation.
Oh, right, yeah.
Right, and I asked him, is there some meeting on Monday morning? And he yelled at me. He's like, I'm sick of all these rumours. There's no meeting. There's no rumours. Why do you keep focusing on all this? Blah blah blah. He went on, and I'm like, all right, whatever. If there was a meeting, I was going to come into work. If not, I'm going to sleep in. Go sleep in. Take the day off. It doesn't matter.
There's probably no
It mattered, apparently.
Do you think Jim knew, or did he?
No.
He did later apologise. He didn't know.
There's no good way to shut down a company, of course, but at like 10 o'clock that morning, we were trying to talk to the Playfield silkscreen vendor about colors for Wizard
Probably
blocks?
Wizard.
Yeah, Wizard blocks. And the vendor was said, "Oh, we were told we couldn't talk to you until after you've had your meeting." We were like, "What meeting?" Everybody keeps denying this meeting, and then all our computers stopped working, and
And I was still at home. I was actually woken up. Amy called me.
yeah,
Duncan's
it
wife.
said, "Don't."
No. This was first. She's like, "What are you doing in bed? It's such a beautiful day. Get up, go to work." And I'm like, "Yeah, whatever." And I hung up the phone. I went back to sleep. And then an hour later, she calls back. She's like, "Maybe you shouldn't go into work today." And I knew right then.
Yeah.
But ironically, I felt relieved afterwards. I remember later that day, I was driving probably up to your place, Duncan,
Yeah.
and I was singing in the car because it was like, for so long we had this axe hanging over our head, and it's like when like you get really sick and you just feel sick in the stomach, and you have to puke, and you're putting it off, and finally it's done, and the deed's done, and it's horrible, but then once it's done, you feel so much better, and that's exactly what it was like.
I met my kids at the bus stop that afternoon, which I never get to do, of course, to let them know Daddy had been fired. So now, forevermore after that, if I'm home in the afternoon when they get home, it's like, oh no, you lost your job again.
And you were moving offices too, right?
Yeah. No, I didn't get fired this time.
What was it like for the 2 or 3 weeks after that?
Well, I immediately just they offered me a position at WMS, which I had to take because I was working on getting a green card. So I to move to a different company, which included Midway, would have been this huge, big hassle. Or I could have gone back to Melbourne, which I didn't really want to do. So I basically, took my morality and threw them out the window and started working on slot machines. But it was really depressing, just seeing people coming in. I don't think
it was surreal to be one of those people coming in.
Right, I don't think Ted, because I was now working with Ted, on Ted Estes' group, working on a new OS for the slot division. And that whole group was all ex-pinball guys, and none of them got any work done for like a week and a half afterwards. And
What's amazing is the repercussions of Midway. I think it hardened a lot of people to just how.
I think
God, I was thinking of cold-blooded or heartless, but those are just such harsh words. But I think the reality of the rug being pulled out in the way that it was pulled out, many of the folks at Midway had pinball roots.
Yeah.
The Ed Boones of the world, Eugene Jarvis and others, and I think that the fact that everybody had gotten treated, I won't say shabbily, because yes, there was opportunity. Go to work at Midway, go to work for Slot Machine.
Ken told me flat out that he hoped that everyone would go to Midway. He said, there's positions for everyone at Midway, we hope we get all of you.
But who was Ken?
Ken Fidesma, who was the
Vice President and General Manager.
There you go.
But I think that truthfully, the repercussions were such that, you know what? It was no longer the family. And if there had been any kind of a family environment or whatever else, I think the feeling was that, if Neil can do it for that, he can do it for anything. And there were rumblings that we were going to pull out of coin-operated video, that he was just going to focus on the home. It was just this sensation of abandonment, I guess, if that's the appropriate word. Because at that time I was, back over on the Midway side with my office, and people come, did you hear it? You know what's going on? And this and that. Oh my God, I can't believe he did it. It really was. It was incredibly traumatic.
I didn't understand that whole line of thinking until I was interviewing, maybe a week later over at Midway, and they were shell-shocked over that. And I didn't get it. And then pinball and video had always taken these, it's like sine and cosine, same curve but shifted.
Right.
And they'd always been on the same path. And if pinball had disappeared off the graph, video was going to a year and a half later. As far as they were concerned, that was it. It was done.
It was over.
And lo and behold, that's what happened.
Yep.
Less than a year and a half later.
Yeah.
They just all were this sense of impending doom that I didn't get while I was over there interviewing. And that was also part of the whole. When you say treated shabbily, as a lot of that was forced on them because you still have these companies that are separate but very close together. Mm. And both of them kind of want these employees, and the only way to make it fair is to actually fire them, put them out on the street, and then let the companies compete for them.
Right.
Whereas if it was all still one big company, you just, find places for them or whatever.
Kind of shift them around.
Yeah, so I think that shocked a lot of people. I mean, they just one day they're literally out on the street, and then these two companies are going to compete for them. And I think what shocked them is how many people said, I'm out on the street. I can go anywhere I want to now, and they didn't get
an epiphany.
Yeah, they didn't get a lot of take up on their offers, nearly as much as they expected.
The relative success of many of the people who went independently, Larry DeMar, Eugene Jarvis, and others, George Petrie. I mean, it's remarkable. It's remarkable when you look at the amount of talent and how much they have influenced particular fields of endeavor. Just the creativity, my God, And Williams had been like that for over 30 years. Just incredible talent. When you go back to Steve Ritchie and Eugene Jarvis coming over from Atari in the mid-'70s. From that point forward, the changeover in technology, just light years ahead of everybody else. And they were able to sustain it. That's the part that's even more remarkable. And going back to Steve Kordak, the fact that you had this person who predated and post-dated all of that, and still having that connectivity and that influence people on a day-to-day basis. So
And the company's inability to realize that that creativity had, you know, a lot of value.
Yeah.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Well, not to mention that they just let the company, the value of the company that they just canned,
Go to zero.
go to zero
Right.
over time, numerous times.
Yeah.
Yeah, the people became interchangeable parts, and I think that the depersonalization of those individuals who have been very successful personally and have been very successful on behalf of the company. It's a shame that it was no longer a two-way street as it had been, 10, 15 years, 20 years earlier.
People may not want to talk about this at all, but I was going to ask about Neil. Because in the movie, Neil is sort of a mysterious figure, because I didn't interview him. He's in the movie, but it's not always clear. Is he the villain of the story? Is he...
Neil did what he had to do. He's running a business. He's not doing it to make friends. He thought it was a good move. It's like Duncan was saying, it's a publicly held company. You're only as good as your current quarter. You do whatever you do to make your current quarter look good, and who gives a crap about the next quarter?
I mean, if you crank the price up to the point where people cancel orders, do you back down and say, oh, just kidding, I won't crank it up as much, come back with your orders, or do you stand firm and plow the company into the ground? And, in hindsight, it's easy to say, well, he shouldn't have raised the price, but...
It's not fair to blame Neil.
Right. He thought clearly that raising the price was going to make the company profitable and they would pay it.
Well, before he had a backup strategy, which was slot machines, he had no choice. He couldn't just run it into the ground.
Right.
But once he had the cash cow waiting in the wings,
Right.
if you ran it into the ground, you'd find out the answer. Either it would be successful, and they could both coexist, or it would die, and he'd just finish up with, the thing.
I think in every way possible, the whole death of Williams Pinball is handled in the worst way possible. And ultimately, Neil has to be held responsible for that. He was running the place, even though he was officially at Midway. I don't know how much of it was his decisions, conscious or unconscious, but it was just handled badly. That company had value.
Right. It's not like Neil woke up one morning and thought, I'm going to run pinball into the ground.
Right. But that company had value, and it's a shame it wasn't sold in some way, shape, or form as a contiguous, valuable unit.
I don't think that he had the sentimentality to do what he might have been able to do for the company and hence the industry. I honestly believe that there were a lot of pressures into what the guys are saying. I don't think that you can single-handedly, looking at the picture, he's not Darth Maul. But I think that there were opportunities missed. There was vision that was short-sighted. There was an arrogance that probably pervaded what we were doing and how we were doing it and why we were doing it because of who we were. And I think the one thing that I always took note of and felt pleased with the company, even before I started working there full-time, was that there was always a level of humility that the company had. The successes were never rubbed in people's faces. And I think it became a lot different when the stakes were higher, when it was a home market opportunity to go in and, hey, we're the only company doing arcade games, we're pre-selling it when we jammed down 8,000 empty cabinets of Mortal Kombat 3 that people had to take because we had to ship cabinets for that financial quarter, and the software would be coming at some future point in time. I think that there were a lot of things done with pressure and a lot of things done maybe with not a full appreciation of the consequences. And to Tom's point, hey, if I have something back over here to fall back on, then let the chips fall where they may. I was in any number of meetings where the cost or the price of equipment going out to distribution was set, and I was just like, this is insane. Why are we doing it? I remember doing it with NARC, the first digitized graphics game, and Neil just arbitrarily set a price point. But I think going back to the original question and part of the discussion, I think that, Neil was as much a victim as he was a victimizer. And truthfully, I encountered him a couple of times soon after. One time specifically, I was like, what are you still doing here? And I had a chance to work at WMS after I got laid off in June of 2000, and instead carved out a consulting agreement with the company. And I was going to a meeting and I encountered Neil walking somewhere along Roscoe. I was like, what are you still doing here? And swear to God, out of nowhere, and kind of explained what was going on. I said, so you think that there's still a pinball market? It's like, what?
Yeah.
I mean, we're looking at what? This is the summer of 2000. So, I mean, it's not that far. It's 6 months, let's say. And are you kidding? I mean, that was my first reaction. You've lost all of these people. You have totally betrayed them. I said, yeah. Would they come back? Possibly. But they'd have to come back feeling a better sense of trust and faith that you wouldn't pull out the rug from under them again. I mean, you only get burned once. But and subsequently, we've had discussions, on a few occasions, and I know that there is a part within Neil, part of the bloodline or whatever else, where it comes up. And I know that he's been somewhere in the background of another venture that's starting with coin-operated amusement games. I think that there is a part within him that would love to get another shot at it. I don't think it'll happen, but I think there's a part of him.
He liked the old days.
Yeah, totally. And he loved
Old days, what were the old days in that perspective?
Yeah, he's
When he was making lots of money.
Yeah,
that's right.
when he was making money with talented people, and
Yeah, but also when he could play.
Yeah.
He wanted to play the games, and he did have his input, and Neil is in Mortal Kombat, and so is his son. And, I mean, there's a lot of things where he felt, I think, a connection to the guys. Because he was very much a hands-on person, and you knew that Neil was going to be walking around with his cigar at the end of the day, bumping his little head in. I mean, he was the first person who came up to me when we had to close up. What do you mean I can't get in to the blocked up area? It's my company, I'm paying the money, you're telling me?
He was banging on that door.
He was slamming on the door. Sorry, Neil, we can't let you in. You want me in this damn door right
It's
now?
my company!
I wish we had one of those little slidey things. Sorry, Neil.
I had to actually go back to...
John Polnick was the one who opened the door and stuck his head out. Yes. I'm like, wow.
I had to go back to Lucas and say, all right, look, because I had given them the original list. These are the only people who have access to everything. And it's like,
That was fairly late by that point,
Yeah.
too.
oh no, trust me, I know. Because I got enough grief from him. How's it going? What's going on? I can't tell you. But everything's looking really good. I just can't give you any specifics.
Just John.
So that's what soured him on Star Wars.
Yeah,
That's why he did it.
That's it.
Well, I wasn't part of it until very, very late.
But Star Wars was the best.
I finally had to give in to the pressure, and I want to recommunicating with Lucas, saying, all right,
Let's get free sushi.
I need to give a couple of other names. Because literally, I mean, we signed our lives away. There was a statement saying that,
Right.
I mean, we were
Personally
personally liable if anything got out.
That was ridiculous. Those guys were insane.
What's so funny is that we all took it deathly seriously. And all over the internet, there were little prototype Hasbro toy pictures.
That's right, the lube and whatever else.
Yeah.
We were always
They were
pure.
leaking like SIDS.
It was easy to not leak information. I mean, it's not like we had to try hard.
Yeah. Well, we had to
I mean,
lock the whole area
Right.
off.
And it sucked being imprisoned back there.
Yeah.
That actually, I think, hurt the project as well.
Oh, yeah,
You did
totally.
not-
Absolutely.
You did not have the kind of interplay.
I think I said
It
that
exists in
in the
everything.
DVD.
I
Yeah,
think
I
George
think you would
Gomez
say.
said
George,
that.
yeah.
But you say it also.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was key. It was a shame,
Didn't
but it was a
Tom
necessity.
kept changing the OS from under me, and so
Yeah, it
in
was
5
all
minutes I had
Tom's
to
fault.
rewrite the game.
Tom's fault. Everything was Tom's fault.
Well, there we have it. Now we know.
Cool. It's all my fault.
To me, one of the staggering things is the repercussions that it had beyond Williams. I mean, all of the little suppliers that went out of business. Nova went out of business.
Yeah.
A huge European distributor. It was the 1-2 punch of pinball and then Midway Arcade Games.
Yeah.
Just, company
Even local distributors here.
merged, went out of business. Just the repercussions of Williams just getting out of the business were huge. I mean, there's whole people's lives disrupted that weren't working at Williams. It wasn't just the 70 people or
It's the
whatever.
truth.
And again, I mean, maybe I'm idealistic, but I'd like to think back in Harry Williams' day, he'd think about that kind of thing before shutting a company down. It's not just
As
me.
opposed to after when he came up to Roger and said, "Do you think we could have made it?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
Someone would think, God, if I shut down, there's all these other companies that are going to shut down. Maybe I should really
And it came at a point in time, you have to understand, where companies were faltering. I mean, Japanese companies that had led the way in video games, Tato and others, suddenly dropping out. Well, if somebody wants to pick up one of our games, because I remember Joe Dillon making some trips and coming back, do we want to take this driver that I just got in? Everybody go take a look in the front, and he'd set up this, this mammoth, driving game. You had major players that were, kind of like slowly drifting away. Sega at the time, Namco at the time. Other companies that had been somewhat the cornerstone for video, the pinball companies, kind of disappearing. It is a shame, because I think that everybody started feeling maybe we're in a lost industry, maybe we're in a lost business. All the prices are too high. Well, the equipment isn't good enough. All the players are doing other things. I mean, it's raining. It's sunny. The temperature is too high. It's too low.
It's the internet.
Yeah, it's the internet. I mean, whatever excuses anybody wanted to just point fingers, I think the real critical element of it were companies that were legendary companies that had led the way that suddenly didn't exist anymore.